The Drexelmeier Group is an international supplier to the automotive industry. We create modern interiors for premium vehicles. Our employees produce interiors that exceed the standards of quality, delivery, and customer service. What is assembled is more than the perfect interplay of function, comfort, and safety. At Drexelmeier, we create premium products with passion, precision, and above all, character.
Hello everyone, my name is Rick Jenkins. I'm the publisher at SC Biz News. We're the media company serving about 100,000 business executives throughout South Carolina. Welcome to SC Biz TV and welcome to another episode in our ongoing video series, Industry Trends. Today the industry we're discussing is manufacturing, specifically automobile manufacturing, and the trend, the increasingly popular electric vehicle. Although South Carolina is far from leading the EV charge, sales are picking up. Currently, there are about 4,500 registered electric vehicles in the state. That ranks 28th nationally. We also rank 28th in the number of charging stations that we have out there on the roads. But is this simply a fad, or is it going to catch on for real? SC Biz News executive editor Andy Owens recently gained some insight while talking with Mike Callahan, the president of Duke Energy in South Carolina. He's going to speak with South Carolina Secretary of Commerce Harry Leitzy momentarily, but first let's take a look at his conversation with Mike Callahan. Check this out and we'll be right back.
Well, first of all, like I said, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about a topic that I am deeply passionate about, which is cars. And what an exciting time this is to be working in the electric utility industry. We're going through a significant amount of change on our own, but now we're seeing this intersection really with the transportation sector. Certainly, I know folks have remarked about the Super Bowl ads as an example. There was something like over a half a dozen ads on EVs, certainly more than any other industry. And it really feels like it's a time where this is becoming really just more mainstream. I've been at Duke for going on 20 years now. And I feel like we're at an inflection point. You know, there have been EVs on our system for some time, relatively small numbers, but I feel at this inflection point, we're really going to start seeing some pretty dramatic growth. And that aligns very much with what we're seeing from the automakers as well. You can't go a day without hearing, it seems, a new announcement, a new model of car, you know, a new transition path around when they are going to move away from the internal combustion engine. So that intersection is just exciting to me. My personal experience, for the last 2.5 years, have been driving a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle.
Okay.
The smaller SUV that gives me all the practicality of having an SUV, but it has the benefits of an electric vehicle as well. It gets great gas mileage. As I said, it's a very practical car. When I am particularly in Greenville and just commuting back and forth to the office, I can get by with just the battery. So there are many days that I can go without effectively ever using that hybrid gas engine in the car. But certainly when I do travel across the state, which I do frequently in this role, I have that option with the gas engine as we allow for this electric charging infrastructure to continue to be built out across the state. I also think from my personal experience, something that's been very interesting for me to watch is my kids as they've grown up. I have 2 teenagers, and they're both getting to the age where they will be driving cars. And it's been so interesting to me to see what they think about vehicles. I think about when I was a kid, the rare occasion that I would see a supercar like a Ferrari. I mean, I just thought that was incredible. That doesn't do much for my kids. They get excited about Teslas.
Right.
And some of that, I think, you know, for my son, the performance of a Tesla, 0 to 60 for the top car in 2.5 seconds, it's as fast as any supercar on the market. So that's something that certainly excites him. But let's be honest, too, these are really computers masquerading as cars now. I mean, it's all the bells and whistles on these vehicles that are really exciting to my kids who have grown up with technology really since their infancy. So just again, an exciting time. I'm excited to be a part of Duke Energy and this transition that's underway.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us, Mike. And I know what you mean about seeing a Tesla on the road. We're seeing more and more of them now, but some of the other cars aren't quite as recognizable. Looking at the utilities role, what role does Duke Energy and utility companies have to play in kind of what you're describing as a transformation of the energy sector, kind of brought on by a business development? What role do you have to play?
I view our role really in this process as being an enabler. There's two main areas that we're very much focused on in this, as you said, transition. One is certainly ensuring that we can simplify adoption for our customers. So doing that through various customer programs, bringing some innovation to the table around what kind of rate structures do we need? How can we help them to get the the charging infrastructure that they need at their homes, businesses need on their premises, et cetera. And then the second piece is ensuring that we prepare the grid so that it is ready to take on, this new load. It is something that I think that we can manage very well. In fact, here in South Carolina, we already have what we call our grid improvement program, where we've been making investments, one of the benefits of which has been to enable the grid for increased EV adoption, but also just through some of those customer programs where we can manage usage on our grid. In other words, provide pricing signals to ensure that we don't have all of our customers coming home, on that hot summer day at 5 o'clock, everyone plugging in at the same time when we are at peak demand, trying to ensure moving them off of the peak. So they're charging, preferably overnight when our usage is low, which really syncs very nicely with our grid, but having those pricing signals. And we've seen through some of the pilot programs that we have that that's a particularly effective tool for us to use.
Yeah, I believe I saw something from Duke Energy that said you could reduce the load by 75% by plugging in at the right time. The shape of the load, I think, which is represented by a graph. So let me ask you. It sounds like with some of the incentive programs, which I think are for residential and for businesses, that it sounds like that's an important part of building the grid. That it's not just utility companies coming with it, but you're trying to provide an avenue for small business, medium-sized businesses, and also residents to participate in that. Is that accurate?
I think that's a very accurate statement. And I think, human nature, our behavior, we respond to incentives, and, the economics of this are important to folks. In fact, in some cases, it's one of the reasons why people think about adopting electric vehicles, and particularly as we look at where prices are as we sit here today, $4 or $5, I think more people are looking this as an attractive option. So I think the economics are already driving some of the behavior. And if we can help further incent that in a way that is good for our grid, but also frankly, good for the customer, in my mind, that's just a win-win solution.
Now, if I'm a Duke Energy customer, but I'm not participating in some of these incentive programs, is my bill going to go up? Am I going to be paying more for electricity on my end to help support some of this?
When you say you're not a Duke Energy customer, but depending on
No,
where you're plugging
if I am a Duke Energy customer, but I'm not participating in one of the incentive programs, will my bill go up?
Oh, no. These programs are paid for by the participants in the program.
Gotcha.
Either through some of those credit mechanisms or, one of the things about the demand from electric vehicles that we're going to see is increasing demand for electricity. And the more electricity we produce, particularly if we can take it off of that peak time of day, the more kilowatt hours that are flowing through our system, more units, we can spread our fixed costs over more units and drive down the cost for non-participants as well.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. One thing that we've heard at SC Biz with talking to small and medium-sized businesses is that they're often perplexed about where to start if they want to become part of this. They want to offer charging for their customers and for their employees, but they're concerned about the cost and buying the right equipment. What should they do? And is there a way for the utilities to help them know how to retrofit their building?
Yeah, I can speak to that experience from Duke Energy's standpoint. first stop would be calling us or going to our website. There's a lot of incredible tools out there with information on our programs. There's a lot of new terminology here. You'll hear things like EVSE, electric vehicle. I have to even look up myself sometimes. So, electric vehicle supply equipment.
Yes.
That's nothing more than a fancy name for the EV charger itself. But there's a lot of EV chargers on the market, different sizes, because people have different needs. You start getting into level 1, level 2, DC fast charging. You hear all these terms. So Duke Energy is certainly here to help customers. But then we also have some programs that we've actually just recently proposed, one called a Make Ready program and one called the EVSE program. One case, the first one, the Make Ready program would really allow you to work with us to upgrade your network at your house so that it can take the EV charger, and you'd get a credit on your bill for that cost. And if you're a residential customer, we have a contractor network that can help you do the wiring that you need in your house that we've already vetted, et cetera. And we can help those customers understand what they're going to need in their home. What's the use case? How big of a charger do they need? Those types of things. Okay. Whereas the EVSE program is very similar, but it's more of what I would call a rental program, where it's basically like a turnkey solution. A customer that I don't want to be an expert on EV charging. I just want a solution.
Right, exactly.
And so I'm willing to pay you a fixed amount. You're going to Duke Energy, you're going to install it, you're going to maintain it, but I operate it the way that I want to. And both of those programs are available to both residential and non-residential customers.
Okay.
And I think both of those are, if ultimately approved by the commission, would be a good place to start. At this time, I'd go back to my first point on really reaching out to us, because we have a number of great folks that can help walk through the process.
So it sounds like the small companies or any companies, and I know talked about apartment buildings, because those seem to be a nice density for this kind of thing. It sounds like they could become part of the would they be part of your distribution network of sorts?
Well, they'd be an extension, I guess, of the distribution network, because it would be on effectively the other side of the meter for us, as we say, be behind the meter. But these solutions would basically take that from the meter to, their use case for their customers. And in the particular case of an apartment, the residents of the apartment providing that infrastructure. And then there's multiple ways from there that we've seen it implemented. It can be a case where they provide that electricity to the community residents sort of free of charge.
Right.
Or you're seeing, opportunities where there's software solutions as well that they can charge them to at least recoup the cost of having that system in place for those customers.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that sounds quite interesting. Now, your company operates in several states, and I know you're in South Carolina, but from a policy standpoint, is there an opportunity to work regionally, like with North Carolina and South Carolina and Georgia? And what I'm asking about is, is this a regional effort that needs to take place, or in a national way, or didn't seem like this is going to stop at the state line?
I couldn't agree more. And I appreciate that question, particularly for myself. As you said, we operate across a number of states. We, particularly in our electric utility business, we operate in 5 states. And I, sitting here in South Carolina, have this system that it's a dual state system across North and South Carolina. It's been in place literally for over 100 years. In fact, the first plant that we operated in the Carolinas was in York County here in South Carolina. But as that system has expanded, it's really become a regional one for Duke Energy, and we manage it that way. We plan for the system across the state lines. We don't track the electrons flowing back and forth. They don't, there's no regard to the state line for the electrons, but it's provided tremendous value. It's really allowed us to provide affordable, reliable, and now increasingly clean energy to our customers. But it's also provided tremendous benefits to the region, and particularly South Carolina. It's allowed us to make significant investments of the scale of our nuclear plants. 6 of our 11 nuclear plants in our fleet operate in South Carolina. We have our Bad Creek Pump Storage Hydro Facility in Oconee County. These types of investments were made in a regional way as a system built for the Carolinas. And it brings with it, tremendous economic development benefits, the property tax base in these communities, the thousands of jobs that have been created. And increasingly, I think it's going to be important. This economic development aspect, I really can't underscore enough. We hear increasingly from our customers every day that they want to see sustainable energy solutions. And working as this dual state system, I think will serve us well. We recently attracted Toyota to North Carolina, and I know that renewable energy was a big piece of that decision process for them. We hear that from South Carolina economic development folks on our team internally and folks externally as well. So this regional approach has certainly served us well for many years.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We talked with the Department of Commerce and Harry Leitzy with the new secretary, and he certainly sees this as an economic development issue. As far as I know there's some federal infrastructure funding for some public charging aspects to it, and I know that your incentive programs are looking at small businesses and also residential in a big way. Are we going to be? How much time do we have to make sure that we're ready so that when everybody plugs in that we can handle this? What are we looking at?
I think it is going to take place over time. And let me just start by saying I'm confident that we can manage this transition because it is going to take place over time. And I think there are going to be a number of programs that are going to be complementary of each other. You brought up, the federal infrastructure money. That's certainly going to be a component. I think that's going to help incent electric vehicle charging infrastructure along highway corridors. It's also going to ensure that there's equal access to this opportunity in low-income communities. So I think the federal government will certainly play a key role. I think state government will play a key role. But all of this is absolutely going to take place over time. One thing that for me that I think about is the fact that, behind a house, a car is probably the second most expensive asset most people will buy.
Absolutely.
And they're not changing those out overnight. While I think the growth is going to be rapid, it's starting off of a low base. It will take place over time as people replace their cars. So I think that's first. But also, I think through some of these innovative programs, as I mentioned, if we can shift the demand on the system away from our peak. In residential, I think we absolutely can do that. And we've seen that behavior, as I mentioned, from our pilot programs. It will be things like some of the fleet programs. So think about someone like an Amazon or a UPS as they change out their fleets. Those are going to be more substantial demand, and we'll have to ensure that the grid is ready to take on those customers. But that's very much like today in economic development space, which we were just talking about. South Carolina has for a number of years done incredibly well attracting people to come to the state. And we do what we need. We make the investments necessary to make the grid ready to attach that new customer to the grid. And I would view this very much in the same way, something that we can manage over time.
Yeah, it sounds like the residential has a little more flexibility in terms of how to handle the peak. And when you get into fleet operations, and we're also in South Carolina, with the port, we're looking at how trucks might be able to do that, but the technology is just not there yet. A diesel truck can go a couple thousand miles. A battery powered semi can go about 150 miles before charging, and so I think there's some to be done there. Is there a strategy in place for dealing with fleet vehicles like the Amazon, the UPS, and maybe even mass transit type things?
I would say that the strategy is very much planning in advance. I mean, we include these forecasts in our demand forecasts, which allows us to plan for both where do we need to make improvements to the grid, but as well, one thing we haven't talked about yet is generation as well, ensuring that we have the generation in place to provide the electrons that are necessary to charge the batteries. So I think through that forecast, continuing to monitor staying in close contact with our customers, working closely with folks like the Department of Commerce to understand the companies that we're attracting to this state. It will take a little bit of an all of the above approach to ensure that we can do this in a rational and thoughtful way.
Now, you mentioned gas prices earlier. I don't think I could probably buy an EV today if I wanted to, because I'm sure that there's quite a line at the dealers. Are you in contact? I know you're working with state and federal regulators. Are you also in contact with automakers? Is that part of your relationship to figure out what needs to be done?
It certainly has been, and it has been for a long time. We have worked with a number of auto manufacturers as this has evolved over, say, the last decade. For a time, it's been a little bit of the chicken and the egg on, do you need the charging infrastructure before people will buy the cars, or do we need the cars before you put in the infrastructure? And I feel like all of that is really converging now, and probably in no small part because of that partnership that a lot of utilities like Duke Energy have had with automakers to understand and think through what is the best way to manage this transition.
Gotcha. Well, what is at stake? Like, why is it important for us to get this right?
Well, I think that when you think about a 21st century economy and how important transportation is, how important it is to ensure we have reliable energy, we need to ensure that we get this right. We need to ensure we've got the capacity on the system to, like I said, the generation that we need. We have the grid prepared to take on this additional load. And frankly, when you think about how important transportation is as the lifeblood, you brought up the port as an example. I'm just amazed when I travel across the state of South Carolina and I see the importance of the port in Charleston, but then I see the inland ports in places like Greenville and the transportation corridor in between those two. As that becomes increasingly electrified, it's just so important to our overall economy. So it's something we have to get right.
All right. Thank you. This is Mike Callahan, who is the president of Duke Energy for South Carolina. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Andy. It was great being with you.
Welcome back, folks. That was a recent conversation between SC Biz News executive editor Andy Owens and Mike Callahan, the president of Duke Energy in South Carolina. They, of course, were discussing electric vehicle trends right here in South Carolina. I'm going to kick it back over to Andy for further conversation about EVs. This time, Andy is with South Carolina Secretary of Commerce Harry Leitzy. Andy, take it away.
Thank you, Rick. Today we are talking with Commerce Secretary Harry Leitzy. He was appointed by Governor Henry McMaster in 2021 to serve as the state's Secretary of Commerce. Mr. Leitzy has been a top-level executive in leadership positions for many corporations, including Bell South, AT&T, General Motors, and I believe you're a graduate of Princeton University and the USC School of Law.
That's correct.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So we're going to be talking about electric vehicles in South Carolina, and electric vehicle sales are trending up, though relatively few are still sold compared to internal combustion engines. But what is the promise of this sector for the state of South Carolina?
Well, so South Carolina has been an automobile state now pretty much since BMW located their facility in Greer in the early 1990s, and more recently Volvo has located here, and we have a number of other OEMs now in the state. In fact, a good percentage, probably the highest percentage of our manufacturing workforce of any other industry sector is in the automobile sector. So we're definitely an automobile state. And if you think about the future, battery electric vehicles are clearly the future of where the industry is going. This is really a once in a generational, once in 100 years transformation that is going through the automobile industry. If you think about it, this is really the biggest change to the automobile industry in over 100 years. Henry Ford pioneered the mass production of automobiles with gasoline combustion engine, and that has been the determining mode of transportation ever since. So the replacement of the gasoline combustion engine by the battery electric vehicle is indeed a transformational change for the industry. And so for South Carolina as an automobile state, that presents some unique opportunities and some unique challenges, and be happy to discuss those as well.
Sure. And, I read a report that said the Southeast is lagging in charging infrastructure. And I think that's really true for the entire nation, because as this technology changes and more people adopt it, considering this increase in demand, are we going to be ready for everyone to plug in?
Well, so the good news is that we're not going to all wake up tomorrow in a world where everybody has a battery electric vehicle.
Right.
And as you indicated, even though sales have started to trend up, it's still a very, very small percentage of the total sales. And if you think about it, what we are seeing is a shift in the industry as they invest to make this change from production of gasoline combustion engines to electric vehicles. And we're starting to feel that now. But most of the plants that are being announced are not going to even be into production until the mid-decade.
Right.
And it takes literally 20 years for the fleet that's in the United States to turn over. So even if we did wake up tomorrow and everybody who was buying an automobile decided to buy a battery electric vehicle, it would still take 20 years for the fleet to completely turn over. And even the most aggressive forecasts that I'm seeing are that we won't see the majority of vehicles will still be gasoline combustion engines until maybe around 2050 before the majority of vehicles are electric. So this isn't all. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that's going to happen extremely quickly, and that gives us time to prepare the grid and to understand the kind of changes that are going to be needed. That's obviously not the role of my agency. There are energy companies and power companies and power regulators that are involved in that transformation. But it's certainly something that will evolve as more and more electric vehicles are bought and become part of the fleet in the United States.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective to have, because we do hear so much about it. We think that it's come imminent, but that does seem to buy us a little bit of a time to get ready. You mentioned some of the power companies, and some of the charging infrastructure is certainly going to be powered by a private sector. But we do see like municipal parking garages right now with a few parking spaces. Is there a role for the state to play in ensuring over the next 2 decades that we have things in place to support this? Is this going to be a role that the state will play?
Well, I'm sure that obviously the state wants its citizens to be able to do what they want to do, and that's part of the general role of the state. It's definitely not the role of my agency. As I said, there are other agencies that are involved in that and will be part of that process, and I would certainly defer to them in terms of how they facilitate that to occur.
Do you now you work for General Motors, and I think it's unusual for a commerce secretary to have that direct automotive experience. And Commerce Secretary Hitt was from BMW, and you have experience with General Motors, so we seem to have that in our back pockets. Given your unique perspective, you were responsible for ensuring that new technologies in General Motors were passed out across their platform. Given that background, what's next? What do we need to be looking out for and getting in front of as far as this technology is concerned?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, this change that's occurring, this transformational change that's occurring in the automobile industry, I think is going to present some unique opportunities for our state and also some unique challenges. So first of all, we have to recognize that as we are an auto state, we want our businesses that are already here to grow and thrive and succeed. And so in order to do that, we have to make sure that we have the right environment to help them grow and thrive and succeed. And so the changeover, if you will, that is occurring will involve new suppliers and new supply chains that need to be established. And so we need to help these businesses recruit new suppliers into the state so that they have ready access to the components that they need to make these new types of vehicles. And I think that's going to be a very important thing that we need to do to support our businesses that are already here. And that also presents some great opportunities because recruiting those new companies here will establish an infrastructure and a supply chain, if you will, that it will allow us to recruit new companies that haven't been in South Carolina. You know, we've had some success already. Proterra, which is a company that is located in Greenville and actually started in Greenville, produces electric vans and electric buses and is actually the largest producer of electric buses in the country. Arrival is another relatively new startup that is going to produce electric vans and buses as well. And their first United States assembly plant is in Rock Hill. And then we have Oshkosh Defense, which announced last year that it would be locating in Spartanburg, and it will be building the new post office delivery vehicle. The current post office delivery vehicle was actually designed in the 1970s. So this is the first upgrade to the delivery vehicle in almost 50 years. So it's significant. And you think about the post office fleet, which is really one of the largest fleets in the country. And they will be manufacturing both gasoline combustion versions of the delivery vehicle as well as electric versions of the vehicle as determined by the government in terms of what they need. And so we have, I think, in Mercedes-Benz, which produces the Sprinter van outside of Charleston, is going to produce an electric version of that van. In addition, BMW and Volvo have announced fairly aggressive plans with regard to production of electric vehicle lines in both Greer and in outside of Charleston. So you know, I think we've got a very well established cluster of businesses, and we would look to grow that.
Yeah, it sounds like that the economic development opportunities, even though we may be 20 years for a fleet turnover, the economic development opportunities are already here, and we're kind of realizing some of that.
Yeah, and what you see with the automobile industry is obviously it's a very capital intensive business.
Right.
The automobile assembly plant is a large facility that has to be planned and invested in years and years before it actually gets into production. And even today, with the kind of accelerated timelines, aggressive timelines that the major producers want to utilize, it's still going to take 3 or 4 years from when a plant is announced to when it actually gets into production. So we are starting to see the beginning of this tidal wave of investment as the industry pivots to this new paradigm of the battery electric vehicle.
All right, very good. Mr. Leitzy, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate your time, and then thank you for your insight about this emerging sector for South Carolina.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much.
Welcome back, folks. Thank you, Andy Owens, our executive editor here at SC Biz. He has been talking with South Carolina Secretary of Commerce Harry Leitzy about electric vehicles and the future of EVs here in the Palmetto State. Hope you enjoyed the show, folks. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Industry Trends. Stick around on SC Biz TV, see if there's anything else you might like to watch, and we will see you next time.